The thing is, you're absolutely getting ripped off. Look at that. This is the M2 Mac Mini, the newest one right now with the base model, 256 gigabytes SSD. If you want to double that, so for extra 256 gigabytes, you're gonna have to pay $200.
Damn!
If you want to get 1 terabyte SSD storage in there, which is actually 750 gigabyte upgrade from the base, right? You get $400 bill for that. And I thought there's got to be a way to fix that because this is ridiculous pricing. So I reached out to my friends at Samsung to say, look, I've got this idea and I found a way how to help people. Would you be interested in sponsoring the video? So this video is sponsored by Samsung. Thanks very much, Samsung. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about external SSD, not the internal SSD. Number one, when something happens to your Mac's SSD inside the chip, you're gonna not just lose the data on it, you're gonna lose the whole Mac. That's it, it's gone. Like on PC, you know, your hard drive, SSD, something fails, no problem. You might lose the data. If you have backups, whatever, you just replace it and then you keep going, right? But we can't do that in here because this is SoC, so system on a chip. We can't do that on the new M chips Macs from Apple. But there's different ways how you can expand the storage on your Mac. So I've got few options here, and I'm gonna give you the fastest storage option solution, as well as some of the budget options available and some of the tips if you want to upgrade your storage. Now I'm gonna jump in straight away and talk about the enclosures. I'm running a competition on these Mac Minis as well as this 13600K CPU. And if you want to get one of these for £1 or $1, then stick till the end of the video to learn more. Right, there are M.2 and SATA SSD enclosures. I'm not sure if you knew that. So if you've got an M.2 SSD like this one here, the Samsung 980, perhaps you've got a few of these left over from your PC. Let's say you moved to Mac and you've got some of them on your PC and you're thinking, man, I can't use this storage anymore because my Mac doesn't allow me to put these M.2s in there. There is actually a way. Or you might have these 2.5-inch SSDs, something like the Samsung 860 EVO. You can actually utilize these as well with these SATA enclosures like I have one in here. Now this is a little bit bigger and you're not going to get the best kind of speed out there, but if you want to repurpose some of your older SATA drives, then you can do that by just popping in these. If you want to pick out any of these enclosures, I'm going to leave the link in the description below, as well as some of the recommended SSDs there. So there's an option to do that, but this is USB-C, so the max speed you're going to get from here is maybe 500 megabytes per second, which these days isn't as fast as you can see some of the integrated in there. But then there's kind of another level up there, which are these M.2 SSDs, and I've got plenty of these going around. I'm using like a few of these for my Blackmagic cameras. I'm recording on these and transferring data, so I've got a few of these laying around, but there's kind of two separate levels of these. The most common one that you can find on Amazon, wherever, is a 10 gigabit M.2 SSD kind of enclosure, which I have over here. So I'm using one in here. As you can see, this is the M2 Pro. I'm doing some rendering tests in there, and all the footage is actually on an external SSD enclosure there. You pop it out, you can put your M.2 SSD in there, like the Samsung 980, and then the max speed you're gonna get out of these is up to 1000 megabytes per second, somewhere around there, most likely around 800, 900 mark, something like that. But if you're thinking about professionals and perhaps someone who looks at the internal SSD and thinks this is so much slower than what I can get internally, right? Upgrading to like the 1 terabyte one, I might get like a few thousand megabytes per second read and write speeds in there. Then comes the high level of M.2 enclosures, which are these ones here. This is not a Thunderbolt enclosure, but this is Thunderbolt compatible enclosure. There are a few of these out there and you can check out different ones. Most of them perform very, very similar, and it doesn't really matter which kind of a Thunderbolt enclosure you go for, but there are some things that you need to look out for. Because when you look at the 40 gigabits per second kind of enclosures, which are like the Thunderbolt rating that everyone kind of plasters on all of the M.2 enclosures, don't get fooled by that, right? You see an M.2 enclosure, for example, this one here that says 40 gigabits per second speed. On it here on the bottom, you're thinking, wow, 40 gigabits per second, that's 5000 megabytes per second read and write speeds. I'm gonna get a Gen 4 SSD like the Samsung 980 Pro, pop it in there. I'm gonna get 5,000 megabytes per second. That's faster than the internal SSD on the Mac. Well, actually, that's not true, because not all of that 40 gigabits per second bandwidth is data transfer. There's video transmissions and all sorts of things. So we can't use all of this as data transfer for, you know, kind of a storage like that. So for example, if we're looking at the SSDs that you can buy externally, you've got this one here, about $90, but this is only up to 1050 megabytes per second. The T7, same 1500 megabytes per second. T5 is actually 540 megabytes per second. They're not so fast, but this one is much faster. I'll show you in a moment how this works. But when you're looking at the enclosures, they come at different pricing, and I'm gonna leave my recommendations and some of the options in the description below as well. Like, I'm using this ACASIS here. I've done a review on that on my channel already if you want to check that out as well. But this is 40 gigabits per second. This is one of those things that kind of indicates that this will be a fast M.2 storage. Now, this might not be Thunderbolt, right? But it is Thunderbolt compatible. We've got one from Sabrent, as you can see. This comes at only $99 if you want to get that enclosure. This one here, OWC, is actually $79, which is ridiculous. And then if you look at the Samsung 980, which is for 1 terabyte, $80, right? Just to put this price in perspective, this is so much cheaper. $80 plus the ORICO M.2 enclosure here, 40 gigabits per second. This can have up to 4 terabytes in here, $140. So we're looking at about $210 for this altogether. How good is it? How fast this is? Let's find out. Now you might be thinking, what if I go with the Samsung 980 Pro or 990 Pro, for example, or some of the higher end Gen 4 NVMEs? And I'd say it's not really worth it, just because we're going to be bottlenecked by the actual enclosure and the transfer speeds. So it's not so much worth it paying for the extra money for this one. But for the very high-end people who want the little bit faster random read and write speeds on the Gen 4 drives, you can do that. But the maximum transfer speeds will be capped at whatever the enclosure will do, if that makes sense. So looking at all the Samsung drives, I found that the 980 here is the best bang for buck in terms of that. If you go with much slower drives and much less ones, you're gonna actually lose the speed. If you go higher ones, you're gonna lose just, you know, the performance that's just gonna be on the table. But for that price, for $80, it's hard to beat this one in here. So let me show you how to build it or set it up. Let's say you got one of these enclosures, this ORICO one here, and depends on your enclosure, you might have slightly different installation, but if you watch this one, you know how to do all of them. This one actually needs a little bit of a screw to put in. So underneath there is one screw, so we'll just undo that screw. Now what you can do next is pop the M.2 SSD in there. So we've got the 980. It goes in like on an angle, something like that. And that's completely fine. And then you take one of the screws that was in the box and then fasten it down. Some of the enclosures will have actually a rubber kind of standoff or something like that, and toolless design. It just depends on the enclosure, okay? And mine actually came with a little bit of a thermal pad and a heatsink. So basically how this works is we're gonna take this thermal pad off here, right? Take one side off. And we're going to put that on top of the SSD here, just like that, okay? And then you peel off the other side as well, because usually we'll have it on both sides. Boom. And once you've got that one off, you put this tiny little heatsink that's come with me on, you put that one on top just like that, and that's going to keep it cool there. Now sometimes you don't have the heatsink with it, but the heatsink will actually be mounted on the bottom plate or off the chassis of the enclosure, and then you'll get the heat spread on that way. It's just different ways how you can do that. But basically the installation is simple like that. But this is how you do the hardware. When you plug this into your Mac, you start to realize very quickly that, wait a second, nothing's actually coming up when I'm plugging this in. So this ORICO one is very good because you've got USB-C to USB-C cable, as you can see, plus a USB Type A extra adapter. So if you are using this on another Windows device, for example, or something like that, that doesn't have a USB-C port, or you run out of the Thunderbolt ports in the back there, you can actually use the USB Type A as well. But bear in mind, you don't have a USB Type A port often that is 40 gigabits per second kind of speeds. Usually you're going to be limited to 10 gigabits per second or so on. So I recommend using USB-C port if you can. So I'm just going to plug it in the back over there. So if you open your Finder, you've got it plugged in and you realize nothing is actually coming up here. Where is the SSD? Here's what you have to do. Hit Command and Spacebar and go Disk Utility. Open Disk Utility. And then you can see that we've got an external SSD here suddenly appearing there, 1 terabyte media. What we have to do is actually initialize it or erase it or make it into our format here. So all you have to do is just click that erase button over there. You can name it. Let's name it Samsung 980 external format. If you're a Windows or Mac user that uses both like systems at the same time, I recommend using exFAT, which is this one here. So you can read it on both of the machines. Let's say you pulled some files off, go to Windows machine or something like that, you can use that. But if you are only Mac user, then just use Mac OS Extended Journal. In my case here, I'm gonna go exFAT just to show people that it will work on both of the devices. And then we'll leave this one same and we'll go erase. It's gonna do the erase and then we're just gonna click done. And look at that, straight away you can see on Finder, we've got this SSD that's appeared on the side here. If we go info about this, as you can see, the capacity is 1 terabyte there and it's all working. If I copy some files, for example, from desktop in there, it is actually working. So that was 6 gigabyte file in just a few seconds there. Now, what you want to know is how good is this drive? How fast is it? Like what we're talking about here. So I have already done the internal test of this Mac Mini M2. As you can see, the write speeds are 1400 and read speeds 1500. We can do it again. Okay, write speeds a bit more, 1700. Read speeds 1563. Okay, and now if we're gonna select the new Samsung drive that we just did, okay, we're gonna press open and let's do speed test on there as well. Look at that. The write speeds 1400, read speeds 1700. So we're getting literally very similar speeds what we're getting the internal SSD of the M.2. As you can see, look at that read speeds 1800. That's a bit faster than what we had before. The write speed seems 1400, something like that speeds, but as you can see, it's very good compared to the internal SSD. If you're a Mac user, you might be saying, hey, if you double the Mac, storage to 512, or actually 1 terabyte one, then you're gonna get much faster read and write speeds on the internal SSD. And yes, that is true, but you're paying a lot more for this as well. And the thing is, if that SSD inside there still breaks, you can't do anything, right? But here, we can easily service it, put another one in on the outside. It's fantastic. If we're copying 2 files over here, just like that, I mean, look, there's 12 gigabytes and we've copied them over in about 5 seconds. If you want to have video editing or anything done on these external M.2 enclosure or drives, it's completely doable. And just to bear in mind how much cheaper this is, right? We're paying about $210 compared to $400. So it's half the price and actually faster. And I've left the best part till last. Let's say you don't want to use this M.2 enclosure anymore and you are going PC, or you're using a PC as well. You can take that M.2 out from there and then pop it into your PC and you get even more performance out of that M.2 SSD. You get up to 3500 megabytes per second, so more than double the speeds what we're getting over here, because we're just limited to that enclosure inside this M.2, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And if you're using Windows devices, sometimes you get even faster speeds. As you can see here, I'm getting read speeds of up to 3000 megabytes per second. So we're getting pretty much double the performance in there. Obviously, it's slightly different test there as well, but this is just insane. insane performance on both of these things. If you have just something on the Mac or installed on the Mac, you're not going to be able to transfer this between different devices. But right now, look at that speeds here. I'm just going to do the same Blackmagic disk speed tests here as well. If I'm putting it on the same test what we did before. Write speed, as you can see, is not as fast on this exFAT on Windows laptop, but let's see the read speeds. Look at that, the read speeds are much faster, 2.5 gigabytes per second. Now I want to show you another drive here, just a different enclosure, very similar settings as we have here. Same SSD, different enclosure, and then look at that here now. We'll do the same tests on that drive now. Look at that. Some of the drives can be a little bit faster. As you can see, this one here is 1800 and read speeds we're getting up to 2000. So with this ACASIS case, you can actually get faster speeds than the internal SSD there, which is absolutely ridiculous. Look at that, 2.6. That's ridiculous. And write speeds 2000 megabytes per second. I mean, look at that. That's absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to leave this ACASIS in the description below as well. But one last thing I want to underline is the actual serviceability of this. Now, one of the biggest downsides, I think, with Mac devices, as good as they are, is the serviceability, right? Something happens with your SSD in there, you can't do anything about it. That's it. You're gonna have to send it back. It's gone, or you might be out without your Mac so long. You know, if you're a professional, you can't really do that. But if you have something like this with a Samsung SSD inside, you might just have one just waiting on the shelf straight away. An extra $70 is still cheaper than an internal SSD there. And when something happens, boop, you just pop in a new one and then send that SSD back to Samsung, because you get 5-year warranty with Samsung SSDs. Now, Apple doesn't even give you that warranty inside there with that SSD, which is ridiculous, right? Apple gives you 1 year, limited warranty, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But with this Samsung SSD, you get 5 years warranty and a very high terabytes written spec, around 600 terabytes written, which is very good on this Samsung 980 SSD. 600 terabytes written means that every single day for the next 5 years, what you can do with this 1 terabyte SSD is you can rewrite on the drive around 330 gigabytes and delete those files every single day for the next 5 years, and that's going to be completely fine according to Samsung standards. If we are looking at the Mac internal SSDs, then these aren't that good in terms of terabytes written spec. Now this is hidden and they don't want to advertise this, but even at the base model, or if you do that internally, you're much more likely to lose that SSD in there. And Apple is saying as well, look, after 1 year, sorry, it's up to you. But with this, we get 5 years of incredible performance. So as you can see, I'm quite buzzing to find you a solution that's cheaper, more durable, has a little bit more flexibility. It's just, in my opinion, better in every single way than just internal SSD. Now, I know that you have to have this plugged in as an external thing. You might need an external, dock, for example, or Thunderbolt dock if you want to have loads of these and you don't have enough of these USB ports in the back there, Thunderbolt ports. But all of these are small problems to me and much easier to overcome than just upgrading the internal SSD and paying absolute top dollar. So how do you get these two Mac Minis for £1? Well, here's how. I am raffling both of these away just to support the channel and just to give back for you guys something for, subscribing and watching and things. So I have created a profile and the raffle competitions on raffle.com. And the reason I'm doing it apart from there is just to give a little bit of protection for you who are watching this or who want to enter this raffle or who wants to have a bit of fun and put a quid in and see if you can actually win one of these. It's 100% legit. This is worldwide. Only thing you have to enter is go in the link in the description. You don't need to follow or do anything in the social media channels. Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram if you want to, but you don't have to. All you have to do is go in the raffle site, enter for £1 a ticket, and that's it. This PC can be yours. And if you want to win more or get more chances to win, get 2 tickets and so on. So this is completely up to you. The winner of this will be drawn on my channel as well, and you'll get a notification on there as well. But this is trusted site. It's something that gives you protection and me a little bit of credibility, so you can be sure that you can win something completely hassle-free, and this will be delivered to you at the doorstep for just £1. This is just crazy. I'm so excited that someone's gonna get one of these or both of these Mac Minis for £1 or $1. Check it out in the description below. Thanks Samsung for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks guys for watching. Bye bye.